All right, I might get us moving. Thank you very much for coming back from your afternoon tea. It's my job to bring you home today. Rob Webb is my name. I work at a place called AFAC, the National Council for Fire and Emergency Services. We cover Australia and New Zealand. I've got many friends and colleagues in the room here, and I get to work in this disaster space all the time now, and the natural hazard space. I've spent my whole career in the natural hazard space, and it is very hard not to get excited, not to get interested, not to get, and sometimes despairing, as we found in the last day of doing some futures workshopping, where you think about the world that we're living in now, but we are in a room full of people who can build some of the hope, I think. We're in a room full of people who can get excited and turn what might be despair sometimes into a community of practice, and a community that's going to take us to the next level. I get to work with some really, really good event people in both at AFAC and with NHRA, and never have I seen an event script that says edit as you see fit. The worst thing you can do to a very good events team is to start to wing it. So I'm winging it right now. But look, I am going to acknowledge the Ghana people as well, and just say thank you to them. Thank you for them sharing their story. Cliffy, today, our presenters may or may not, I'll do it one more time, but to our people, not that I would ever tell anybody what to do amongst the sector. We are here but to serve, but don't feel you have to. But I think my personal acknowledgement is just to say thank you. I can never understand the lived experience. I can never understand all of the stories, but all I can do is continue to commit to listen and try to understand. I'll spend a lifetime trying to understand, and that's my personal journey through this. We're a Trans-Tasman, so I also always acknowledge Ngā iwi Māori as tangata whenua and Treaty of Waitangi partners in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and past that, respect to all people either online or all around the world. So we're here to do a showcase that is going to feel a little bit like speed dating. It's going to feel a little bit like just getting a little taste of what's happening. And you'll feel the energy from our presenters today. You'll feel them individually. They'll bring something. What I just ask you to do is think of them as an entire group of people. Think of all the things that are going to be needed in this society for us to live in it, both in disasters, outside disasters, all of the connections we have to make. And bring your curious selves and bring your humble selves, I suppose, as well. Just put yourself in the position, not maybe from your perspective, but the whole system, because we'll see different parts of it. And the reality is none of this will work unless we're all finding the connections. So just challenge you through today is just look at the connections and how this will all fit together, because it's going to be life ahead will be interesting, and it's kind of going to need us to work together a little bit. So Slido's here, obviously, for people to use and ask questions. And this is just a snapshot of 150 different research projects that are happening. I've had part in some of them. I've been sort of actively involved and hoping for some of them to succeed, which is really exciting to be in the role I'm in. So we have end users with all of the projects, and we have researchers, and there's a project management panel that will come together to try and keep the projects on the right track. The really interesting thing that NHRA has done this time around are the implementation panels, just to start to look at how we're going to use this. And when we start research now, it's not just the problem or the question that you're trying to solve. It's, well, what's the pathway? It doesn't always have to be into an operational place or a particular resource. If we capture it and we can sort of chart a path for the next generation, because that innovation and evolution is where science is best, I think. So there'll be common themes through today. There'll be different things that you take out of it, and it would be interesting to hear some of those themes as we go through the Slido conversation. I'm going to stop riffing now. I'm going to my timekeeper is down there. So the first 0, I've got a 0. That's not the first time I've been given 0. Let's begin our first showcase presentation, which is the refreshed ADRI. We also already heard Brendan Moon speak a little bit of that, or ADRI 2 as it's known. provides a comprehensive picture of the nation's disaster resilience capacity in 2025, which we are excited to share with you today. So the first half of this presentation, Paul Gloyne is the Assistant Coordinator General Data Analytics and the Chief Data Officer at the National Emergency Management Agency here in Australia. He's here to help us launch the refreshed ADRI 2, reflecting on the potential for use going forward. And then I'll ask, after Paul, we'll ask Associate Professor Melissa Parsons, is a resilience scientist at the University of New England. She's the lead researcher for ADRI 2 and the National State of Disaster Resilience Report. So can I hand over to you for the first 10 minutes to both of you and start with, thank you, Paul.
Hello. Really excited to be here today to be a part of the release of the Australian Disaster Resilience Index 2 and that next iteration. And I thought what I would do was probably try to set a bit of the context in at least a view and my experience on evolution in data and emergency management. So just to the right on the image, we're going to press the go button to get some of those bits on. Anyway, let's keep going. So on the right-hand side here, we'll see an image that was generated using optical satellite that gave us at least a picture. It gave us a view of the floods in 2021. It was using the optical satellite. It had some of those challenges. Couldn't always see through cloud. It would sometimes actually have issues with determining where the roads were and within urban environments. But it gave us a view. It allowed us to provide at least a high-level view of what exposure looked like for those flooding events in the Hawkesbury. To where we are now, and this was an image that was shown as part of the Coordinator General's slides. Where we are now, we're using the new technology to sport a view not only of the extent, but it also gives us a really good picture of depth. So this is something that's only just starting to come online. It's been offline for a few years, but we're getting some incredible imagery that really does help support a view of potential impact. Intersected with state-led impact assessment data, it creates an incredibly powerful image and visualisation of what is being experienced. And as we can see here, and courtesy of New South Wales, great effort, we can see there are a number of homes there that are actually in bad shape, so it really helps us understand and provide briefs. The next thing that we've sort of been working through and is that next sort of iteration as we progress through data and natural hazards is looking at where's the risk. And we've sort of embarked on a piece of work that helps us understand where risk is across the nation. Now, it is difficult to do on a national scale. We know that data is complex. We know that it is different in each state. We know that there are challenges with this. But what we're trying to do is bring together a minimum viable product that helps us understand what risk looks like for bushfire, for tropical cyclone, heatwave and riverine flooding. But I suppose the thing that's missing from all of this is the who. And that's where the Australian Disaster Resilience Index comes in. So we can see on the chart that we've got here, there's, just in 2022 alone, and I really should have updated this slide just quietly, but in 2022 there were, approximately 18 million people who were either directly or indirectly impacted by natural disasters. What ADRI helps us with is to actually understand the communities that are there. It helps us understand their resilience. And when we combine our view of risk with resilience, it helps us better target our mitigation activities and hopefully bring in much better outcomes for communities that are more targeted, more supported. I promised 5 minutes, probably didn't do that, so I am going to now hand over to Melissa Parsons, who will help us through for the next part.
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. I guess it is with great pleasure that I introduce ADRI 2, which is now available on the ADRI dashboard. Now, as a researcher, the Australian Disaster Resilience Index was a pretty rare opportunity to do some discovery research, scaffolded by the interests and needs of the sector. Let's do this and see how it turns out. and it did turn out okay. And although I'm standing up here today, I didn't do this research on my own. Ian Reeve, Sienna Birch, Phil Morley, James McGregor, Nicola Foster, and many others collected data, wrote R code, and read decades of composite index and disaster resilience literature, not as a cure for their insomnia, but as a rigorous scientific backgrounding to ADRI. And then Johan Boshoff and his team of developers at UNE CASI designed the ADRI dashboard, and many people have influenced the utilisation of ADRI over the last decade, many of you who are in the room today. The emergency service agencies who helped us to design the ADRI, the AFAC Community Engagement Technical Group and the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC, who were instrumental in getting ADRI noticed and adopted, and then the many users of ADRI data across government, industry and universities. And of course, none of this can be done without funding, and I thank NEMA, Natural Hazards Research Australia, and before that, the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC and partners for their ongoing support. As a research team from a small regional university, it is greatly appreciated. So this map shows the capacity for disaster resilience in each of 2,330 SA2s across Australia. Higher index values represent greater capacity for disaster resilience, so the green colours, and lower index values represent lower capacity for disaster resilience, the purple colours. And we divide that into bands of high, moderate and low. And I'm going to be talking in more detail about ADRI 2 tomorrow, but for now I just want to point out a couple of the main findings. 52% of Australia's population, or about 13.5 million people, live in an SA2 assessed as having moderate capacity for disaster resilience. 25% of Australia's population, or about 6.5 million people, live in an SA2 assessed as having high capacity for disaster resilience. And 23% of the population, or about 5.9 million people, live in an SA2 assessed as having low capacity for disaster resilience. And there is still that very distinct relationship between capacity for disaster resilience and remoteness. So the SA2s with moderate capacity are predominantly in metropolitan, inner regional and outer regional areas, covering about 9% of Australia's land area. Most of the SA2s with high capacity for disaster resilience are located within metropolitan and inner regional areas, and they're all crammed in to less than 2% of Australia's land area. And then the SA2s with low capacity for disaster resilience are generally in outer regional, remote and very remote areas. And these make up 89% of Australia's land area. So there are clusters of SA2s with low capacity for disaster resilience in metropolitan and inner regional areas, but these usually sit in proximity to areas of higher capacity. Now, in remote areas, on the other hand, low capacity for disaster resilience kind of joins up to make these large contiguous patches. So the capacity for disaster resilience in Australia does have quite a significant geographic signature. Now, ADRI, as a model, represents the capacity for disaster resilience as this kind of latent system of social, economic and institutional factors. But that system is not acting the same across the nation, across a state or across a region. And that brings in what I know as a scientist as heterogeneity. And heterogeneity presents some quite tricky policy and practice challenges. There's heterogeneity in physical processes, there's heterogeneity in resilience, and there's heterogeneity in mitigation options. So one of the things that I'm thinking about with this new ADRI2 data is how resilience or mitigation actions can be more meaningful and responsive within this really mosaicked geography of disaster resilience capacity. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those things that we're going to look at in the future and look back on things like ADRI and ADRI2 as these fundamental steps that allowed us to work in the new world, that allowed us to codify some things. And one of the things that we're trying to do across the fire and emergency sector is how do you connect data sets that have never been connected before, both inside the disaster industry but also outside the broader through community. And imagine if we could have all access to that, how much we would accelerate our learning. So on to the next one, which is the Transformative Scenarios project. Had a lot to do with this one. This is a project that we'll be hosting on the AFAC website. I say hopefully because they convinced me to pay for it. I just haven't figured out how I'm going to pay for it, but I think it's a fantastic project that must be paid for. So if you see me with a tin, you'll know that I need a few dollars. But no, I'm going to hand over to the team now. The Transformative Scenarios for a Climate Change World project. Liza Gelt, the principal at Collaborative Consulting, has an extensive background working within and across emergency management and with the community. She's passionate about bringing a diversity of experience and skills to connect research, policy and practice for meaningful results. And I'll also introduce Katelyn Sampson, works with us at AFAC and is the leader of our community safety portfolio. She's been integral since the minute I walked in the door at AFAC. I think she was telling me about this and now just winds me up and makes me want to talk about it. So I'm going to hand over to Liza first, I think. I'll move on from there. Please join me.
Thanks, Rob, and thank you to AFAC and ADRI and NHRA for all their support along the way. I'd like to introduce to you the Transformative Scenarios resources. Now, they are not my project. That project was done by Rios Partners and RMIT, and I think Adriana Keating's in the room somewhere, under the former Bushfire Natural Hazards Cooperative Research Centre. And it's fantastic research, and it has been used by Queensland Fire Department to successfully stress test their strategies. But this utilisation project has really come about is because there wasn't broad uptake. So this project is really about making sure that that fantastic research is useful, usable and used. So firstly, I'm going to tell you about I guess the value of that initial research, and then I'm going to tell you about our project. And I'm going to use imagery that we developed in our project. All right. So what if, all right, cast your mind back to 2018. What if I had told you that the Coordinator General for the National Emergency Management Agency, Brendan Moon, would come up here and tell us that since 2022, we would have had 273 disasters affecting nearly 100 LGAs. That's more than one a week. Would you have believed me? Now, we all know that climate change, or one of the most immediate impacts of climate change, is that increasing frequency and severity of disaster-inducing natural hazards. Yet it would be a mistake to assume that that is the full extent of the problem. There are modern lifestyle factors and other human-related factors that are further increasing our disaster risks, and they are impacting the effectiveness of how we do our jobs and how community responds. So the transformative scenario process is an explorative and adaptable planning method that is designed to help organisations not only adapt to an unpredictable future, but also influence and transform the future. Now, the process itself won't predict future events, but it will provide an ability to elicit action in response to a new perception of the future. It will expose assumptions that would otherwise remain unhidden, and it will foster quick adaptation in times of crisis to look up and out of our day-to-day operational contexts to the multiple contexts, plausible contexts, which we could potentially be operating within. And we all know that one size doesn't fit all. So it's important to consider the various dimensions that impact the way we operate. The initial research worked with senior executive leaders from across the emergency management sector by way of the AFAC Climate Change Group, and identified 2 dimensions that were going to have the most significant impact and substantive impact for the sector itself. And that is the degree to which governance regimes are strategic, long-term and proactive versus short-term and responsive. And the other axis is around social cohesion. So the extent to which our communities have high social cohesion or low social cohesion. So each scenario unfolds in a different way that leads to a different future. We don't have time to walk through each of the scenarios themselves, but by applying this process to your strategic priorities, organisations will be challenged to identify the opportunities to be more proactive in shaping the transformative actions that can influence our future. So as I mentioned before, the challenge was to ensure that this fantastic science and research is useful, usable and used. Some of the utilisation challenges that we heard were about the research. We heard that it was dense and complex and people didn't know where to start. But we also heard some utilisation challenges or barriers to using the research, which had nothing to do with the research. It was, I don't have the facilitation skills required to explore the scenarios with my senior executives and my boards. It was, I'm not confident that in this time-pressed world where we're continuously responding to events, that my executives will engage with the scenarios, and I'm not convinced that I can sell it to them. And then we also heard, and I'm not quite sure how to apply it to our strategies to stress test. So to address these challenges, we designed and developed 7 online modules. They can be hosted on a learning management system platform, but they're not learning development per se. The first 3 are designed to engage and motivate people to complete the stress testing process. And I guess the third one is really about taking you into each of the immersive worlds so that you can imagine what it might be like and then apply it to your strategy. The last 4 modules are really to be used interactively in a workshop. So they can be used live. You can use them in your breakout groups, or you could use it as a strategic planning officer on your own, just working your way through them, depending on your particular scenario. There are also supporting resources, assuming that we don't have access to a live internet-enabled environment. We've got workbooks. But what we've done is we've developed communication engagement plans to help you just step through how to sell it and seed it into your organisation. And there's also a facilitator's guide. We worked closely with a number of organisations, but I'd also just like to highlight that this is relevant not only for the emergency management sector, but also for disaster resilience and recovery sectors, for critical infrastructure sectors, for community organisations. And so we engaged broadly to make sure that the language was accessible, that the imagery was friendly and familiar, and that I guess really importantly, that it wasn't, AFAC and ADRI are supporting it to ensure that it could be publicly available. So that is some of the most key takeaways, I guess, from the collaboration. So So we hope that through this, the development of these online modules and the supporting resources, that we've developed something that's quick and compelling to complete, that it's a self-guided process, so you don't need to have the facilitation skills. It can be completed face-to-face or in breakout groups, and it alleviates the need to engage external parties. So I'm now going to hand over to Katelyn to talk through the impact of the project. Thanks.
Thanks, Liza. And we did just get the 2-minute wrap up, so I'll be as quick as I possibly can. But I've been asked to speak from an end user perspective, but I really do see myself as the cheerleader for this project. I've been such a huge advocate of this piece since we first established that initial piece of research back in 2020. We knew it would have great potential and great impact. We didn't want it just to be a doorstop, sitting on someone's bench. So we knew it would be game-changing, but how we were going to do this was, up to NHRA to help us with. So to see the outcomes and the modules ready that Liza's team has produced is really just magnificent. It's marvellous, and I'm really quite gobsmacked when I see it, in the real world. So just a final comment on scenarios, and there are so many synergies between the futures work that Professor Ariella spoke to before. I was just, all ears picking. There's so many quotes. I know it's been recorded. We can just take so much of that. And I really feel like this scenarios project is the way that we can inject everything that she was speaking about into our agency. So this is that real world application that we're all looking for. We know that scenarios are a really powerful tool to help our leaders, to help our organisations really stress test all our plans and strategies, and to really stretch our thinking so we're able to be agile, to manage and adapt and transform to these really complex, uncertain futures that we're living with. Climate change is definitely one of those big ones, one of those existential kind of challenges that we're living with. And scenarios have been called out in a whole range of different platforms, from the international to the national stage, called out in the Royal Commission in 2020, and in our second National Action Plan, as you can see here, through the first and second priorities. And I'll particularly just call out one section where scenarios were highlighted. The plan says that we need to support the use of scenarios that really extend the imagination, and the method that we've developed that we're delivering to you really will deliver that in spades. So just to finish up, I know we've got the 0 time frame, just some housekeeping and how you can use this, how you can access these. The modules are finished. Liza's team has done an incredible job. Thank you to Rob for agreeing to support their upload to the AFAC and to the ADRI websites. They'll be ready in the next few months. We'll also be hosting a workshop at the AFAC conference coming up in August in Perth, where we'll introduce you to the scenarios and how you can use them, the process. So please do look at that and register and come along and learn how you can use them in your agencies. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to you both. There are groups that we get to work with, whether it be NHRA, whether it be ADA, that change the conversations. And I think the project, if you ever get a chance to have a look at that information, it certainly changed the way I'll walk through the rest of my career, however long that may last. But there's a way the questions we're asking, that's all it's doing, is asking the right questions. And sometimes that is, do we have the right people in the room to answer them? So I'm going to move now on to the next module, the next showcase. So we're going to be looking at extreme fire behaviour knowledge modules. Dr. Mika Peace, a fire research meteorologist at the Bureau of Meteorology, is a fire weather researcher in the high impact weather team. Her research expertise focuses partnering with fire agencies and land management groups to develop understanding of how the atmosphere in 3 dimensions drives fire behaviour. David Field is also with us from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service to reflect on the difference that the knowledge modules can make to getting predictions right in complicated extreme fire situations. Over to you both.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. We've got a little bit of meteorology in here for you as well. Okay, why do we do research? We're seeing through climate change, and we've talked about climate change a bit today, that the intensity and the duration as well as the impacts of weather events is shifting. It's not about the long-term trend, it's about the oscillations inside that in terms of the synoptic and the mesoscale meteorology. In Australia, we're really leading the world in a lot of ways in our climate research, but we do know that the mesoscale meteorology research that we do, which is really ingredients-based, looking at all the ingredients in the environment, has a really direct pathway to decision-making during extreme events. And we can learn a lot, we do learn a lot and have done for decades about an extreme event through post-event analysis of all of the data and information that's available. And in particular in fire weather, because it is such a complex sector, we really do benefit from a multidisciplinary approach. So we work really closely with the fire agencies and other information sources when we're doing the post-event analysis. Through understanding the processes, particularly the dynamical processes, we can then provide more accurate forecasts and predictions next time. The question in this particular research project was, how do we effectively share the knowledge from research in context and put it in the hands of practitioners? So after Black Summer, the then CRC asked us to do 5 case studies of fires around Australia using the coupled fire atmosphere model that we have Access Fire. And when we looked at these fire case studies, there were 2 instances in particular that really shook the ground in terms of what we saw in terms of the fire behaviour and particularly the fire and atmosphere interactions. The first of those was Green Valley that we worked on with David and his team, where a fire-generated tornadic vortex, so a fire whirl with tornado strength winds, overturned a fully loaded 12-tonne fire truck and a young RFS firefighter was killed. From the damage reports, we estimated that the winds were up to 320 kilometres an hour, which is an EF4 tornado, and the tornado scale goes up to EF5. Now, I appeared in the New South Wales Coroner's Court to talk about this event, and one of the first questions I asked were, do these things even exist? Are they real? And the answer, of course, is yes, they exist, they're real, and they have to follow physical processes. Therefore, we can look at the ingredients in the environment and start to understand their formation mechanisms. The second event that really changed the paradigm a little bit was the overnight fire runs that we saw going into New Year's Eve on the 2019-2020 New Year's Eve. And there were a number of fires that made overnight runs. And one of the first things that you learn in Fire Behaviour 101 is that fires lie down overnight. Obviously, on this night, they didn't. The Corryong fire and also the Badger fire, as well as others, did fire runs of up to 6 kilometres an hour for extended periods overnight. So some of them ran 36 or more kilometres an hour. And the reason for this was that the fire plume, which was generating a huge amount of energy because we had 20 or 30 tonnes per hectare of fuel, the fires were emitting so much energy that they were mixing through the shallow surface layer, which was cooler and more stable, and tapping into much windier conditions above, and that was driving the overnight fire behaviour. So it was the fire plume interacting with the low-level jet, the wind above the surface. So from the research, for generator vortices, we developed this little schematic which shows some of the ingredients in the environment where a fire generator vortex can form, and particularly looking at some of the follow-on research that we did, looking at some of the factors in the environment, particularly the fire's updraft in the plume that can generate the components which are strong enough to get tornado strength winds. And we also looked in Access Fire. The red image here on the right is showing us the cross-section of the Corryong fire, and we can see the dark colours of the really windy conditions above the surface, and that interacted with the fire plume and brought the stronger winds down to the surface. And by running the model with the fire coupling on and the fire coupling off, we could see the difference that the fire plume made to where that low-level jet was hitting the surface. So the question is, how do we use this research? We did the investigation of all the data and the information that was available, and we came to new conclusions with the research. But the knowledge, of course, is the practical understanding of the subject, but the value is getting that research into the hands of decision makers and practitioners through training and development of people. And as we know, particularly those of us who worked in state emergency centres around the country, in unfolding natural disasters, it's people who make decisions, and they make those decisions based on the information that they've got available to at the time and the data that's available and the interpretation and the knowledge that they have. So giving people that information is critically important. So we did 3 modules, one on fire generated vortices, one on low-level jets, and an introductory module to kind of bring it together. And this was really focused on training for practitioners. So the fire agencies were really clear that they didn't want this for everybody working on a fire ground. They wanted the target audience of my operational team and David's operational team, the fire mets and the F-bands. And we tried as much as possible in the modules to draw on graphics and information and visuals which were really familiar from the operational environment. So it was the same kinds of colour schemes, the same kinds of graphics that they see in real time, and that familiarity, of course, is really important context when you're under pressure in an emergency management situations. And we tried in the module to set the frame of, if you saw these ingredients at a future event, what kind of information can you share and what kind of decisions could be made? Over to David.
Thanks very much, Mika. It may not be terribly apparent, I guess, if you come from a research background, but research operationalisation or implementation is actually quite challenging from an agency perspective. We cover quite a really broad range of science and engineering, and I guess we're not necessarily resourced directly to constantly monitor for research and even to synthesise that research and implement it into policy all of the time. Couple that with this idea, as you've got a good flavour from Mika there, that this is a fairly technical subject and it's fairly, I guess, complex in the fact that it involves both fire behaviour and also the interaction with weather that's occurring as well. You can see that this kind of research could present a significant challenge in terms of being operationalised. Couple that with the fact that then, if you're actually going to, address this issue, you would need to cooperate in between 2 different teams, so the Bureau and fire agencies. That presents quite a complex problem for fire agencies. And so I guess I just want to pay credit to where credit is due, and Mika and NHRA as well, is packaging this up as, I guess, a training module that's directly implementable by agencies is a fantastic way to translate that research into operationalisation. It really enables us to hit the ground running with this and be able to, I guess, understand these phenomena and, from an incident management perspective, provide good advice to our customers to enhance firefighter safety and also community safety as well. So I think a really good product. And also, just like we mentioned in the last presentation, these modules are available now to agencies. So if that hasn't come across your desk, please have a chat to us later and we can get you in contact with those modules. Thanks very much.
There are these moments that I just get jealous that people get to play with this sort of information. I remember I was forecasting for the Canberra 2003 fires. I was on the 3 a.m. shift, I think, on the morning of the 18th of January, and we rode up the early looking at the plume and the tornado after that. We just didn't know. No, we didn't even have the evolution of the science, I don't think, in the fire agencies wasn't as far. But since then, there is this connection between the science, the observations, the impact, and turning it into something that can be useful. And of course, from there, which is a nice segue into the next presentation, there's all of this information that flows that doesn't stay inside a fire service. It's driving decisions that will ultimately support community decisions. So I want to move on to the next one, which is predictions in public, understanding the design, communication and dissemination of predictive maps to the public. Dr. Chloe Begg, Senior Research Scientist at the Country Fire Authority, has a PhD in Human Geography with a focus on the collaborative disaster risk management and a passion for knowledge translation. In her role at the CFA, she's learning a lot about what it takes to encourage and enable evidence-based decision-making. And Peter Wall is a Public Information and Warning Systems Officer at Emergency Management Victoria. He's part of the broad project reference group for this project, working closely with Chloe and the project team, so the Predictions in Public is truly a co-designed project and product. Over to you both for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Rob. We're going to do a bit of an experiment. Hopefully the mics won't interfere. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners. We'll have to make it work. by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands upon which we're meeting, the Kaurna people, and pay my respects and thank them. I'd also like to thank the panel from the first session and their passionate calls to action. I really got a lot out of that. And what we're going to do is talk about a case study within a project that is really trying to translate research into practice, but also how the practice is influencing the research. So the project is a Predictions in Public project. I'll give a little bit of a background just to situate us all in what we're talking about here. Is this project came about after the 2019-2020 bushfire season, when New South Wales and ACT released red maps during the bushfire season to communicate the scale of risk in the landscape. And very quickly after this, we had conversations within agencies. Should we be doing that? What are we doing? We can do it. We have the technological capability. We have the expertise in the fire behaviour analyst roles. There's expectations from the public to have information real time. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be the stuff that they're looking for. There are recommendations and inquiries and reviews internationally and nationally that are saying that we need to have better warnings, better information. It needs to be more timely. It needs to be more accurate. We conducted some research in Victoria just to get an understanding of the FBAN, or the fire behaviour analyst role quite broadly, but we found that there was real support for using this type of tool during an emergency to communicate risk. Nobody said that was a bad idea. The concern was more around how do we use them? When should we use them? How do we embed them with our existing warning products? And so that's really where the project started. And we wanted right from the beginning to make sure that it was a really collaborative piece of work. So we aimed at the beginning, we're still aiming to use empirical evidence and collaborative processes to create a national evidence-based guidance material for agencies to be able to have something to hold on to when they get told they have to make these products. There's useful, that it's not generic, it's something that they can actually take and it can inform and assist their decisions when using these products. We have quite a large team. We have researchers with various expertises from 4 universities, and we have representation from the AFAC Warnings group and the AFAC Predictive Services group from each Australian jurisdiction, as well as a member who is representing the Bureau of Meteorology. And we meet quite often. We meet throughout the research. We make decisions together. We try to make sense of what we're actually interested in learning and what the complexities are about how do we actually use the research, what are we actually interested in, what are the actual questions, how can we do this? And the project has been split into 3 phases. So the first phase was understanding the current context. How do agencies, what do they think? Agency staff, so from various roles, what do they think about these products and their role? But also testing community comprehension of existing warning products. So we didn't want to design these in a vacuum. We wanted to understand, well, what is it that people are looking for, and how do current warnings across the nation serve those needs? And from that, we got a really good understanding of what people are looking for. And then in phase 2, the idea was to build a whole set of different maps and test the design and how we communicate and see if what people tell us they want is actually what they need. And then in phase 3, once we've done all the research and we know lots more about this whole issue, we were quite sneaky and we said, can we please have funding for 2 practical outputs that we don't know what they are, but we'll deliver them? And NHRA was very generous and said, yes, you can do that. And so that's how the project has been structured. And as we were going through the project, so this is where Peter comes in our little conversation that we want to have, a demonstration of research and practice interaction, is that we just sort of started phase 2. So we were just getting some really interesting information from communities about these maps and how people were interacting with them, what they were thinking when using them, how they were comprehending them, what they intended to do, when Peter's team came to us with a request.
Yeah, so in the lead up to the high-risk weather season last year, we wanted to brief up through our commissioner about the project, about what we're learning, and because there was an appetite to do it. I was part of the process of building the 1920 maps in Victoria. In February 24, we did a map for the Bay and Dean fire, which had its challenges and probably didn't communicate it very well, and obviously it was very early in the project. but there was obviously a desire from our leadership to use these maps if needed. So we wanted to brief up about that. So this was prior to the Grampians fire kicking off. But then, unfortunately, Grampians fire then kicked off. Chloe and her team did a really great briefing for us, which was very helpful to give us some hints and tips if we needed to produce a map. What's also helpful is I've been in all of the meetings throughout the year learning. I remember sitting in probably a month earlier than this, there was some results came in from some of the community testing in WA, and there's things in my brain from that I instantly then applied to the maps as we designed them. I was unlucky enough to be the public information officer on Christmas Day last year, tasked working with our incredible mapper and F-Bands, who's one of them here today, to try and build these maps to get them out to the community. There was 4 maps we built for that, and you can see from there what we used is... Sorry, can you back a slide?
I'll go back.
Yep, sorry. Some of the key things from that recommendations was around directionality of the hazard and the related info. The key thing we learnt was about routes, key things about timings, and then including key landmarks in those. And as part of that was about how then on the maps we then tried highlighted things. These colours aren't great, but when we're building maps in probably 3 hours, had to build 4, we had to make some very quick decisions around them. But the beauty of these maps as you go through them, this was the Grampians one, where we essentially use these maps to support our warnings and the education we're doing out to the community to say, hey, you are now in a much higher risk area than normal. It was an extreme fire danger day, so you have the safe messages for that. But what we're now saying is, no, but there's a fire in the landscape. It's not just an extreme fire weather day. You actually have much more risk here. So our advice is if you're in that area, if you have a plan, you need to enact it now. And if that plan's to leave, leave. Don't wait for the warnings that will come as the fire progresses. And then we can do that. So we had 4 maps we'd used. This is Grampians one. We had, I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head. We had Ballingarook. If you want to skip through. Oh, no, they're not there. Cool. So we had 4 locations. Grampians was the major fire from that. So for me, the key things we learnt from that process through the project was how important being part of the project group was, how I was able to use some of my knowledge from that and the relationships we had with the project group and the project researchers to build and learn from it. But the other thing is we then brought a number of learnings back to the project to help move it forward. And it helped test some assumptions, answer some questions, throw up a million more. This is an incredibly complex thing. It's not simple, and I think some of us probably walked in and said, oh, this won't be that bad, but it's not. And I think we still have a lot of questions to answer, which is not a bad thing. We are still learning, and I think what I love about this project is it's practical. And as a practitioner who is probably tasked with having to build them someday, we're going to work towards outputs that can help us do it in the future. And that's the beauty of the short briefing document. That was a sort of a precursor for that, but we've learned a lot from that. And then from the project point of view for Chloe, what did the project get out of it?
Yeah, so we very quickly did a bit of a debrief session with all of the people who were involved in the production of the maps at different levels from the region up to Peter's team at the state level to try and capture people's experience. It was quite, it was quite stressful to be told at the start of the day that you had to produce 4 maps and that there was no clear guidance for doing that. And so to be able to learn from that experience and to have that, that I guess I could call it the silver lining of that experience was that we learnt a lot and we were able to bring it back into the project. Peter and Nick and Andy Ackland, they came to a steering group meeting and talked about their experience. They shared it with the rest of the jurisdictions, which I think was really valuable, but also it helps us to inform our evidence-based principles. So there are some things that they were sort of unclear in the project because a lot of the jurisdictions haven't actually had to use these maps yet, but by having this experience and learning from it, there were some principles or some ideas that came from that have directly informed the research and the design of the research that we're doing. And that is us. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks so simple to be doing that. What I love about that is actually just how the product is simple. If you get a chance to look at the hazard note and the testing they'll do with the communities, often we have really complex inputs, but some of the decisions the community have are really quite are sometimes just yes or no's. But we don't always hand the information to them in their context, in their lived understanding, or relevant to their part of Australia as well. So that'll be an interesting to watch the evolution of that over time. It's a really important one. That is more than just tracking blobs on radars, as we might have done in the past, without any disrespect to the Bureau back in the day. Okay, let's move to the next one. It's make sure I'm not skipping one, sorry. It's the Human Factors Project, considering how emergency management decision-making can be enhanced. Dr. Greg Drummond is an Assistant Commissioner at Fire and Rescue New South Wales and sits on the NHRA's Education and Training Committee with more than 2 decades in the emergency management sector. Greg is passionate about bringing out the best in people in times of critical decision-making, and Daniel Austin is Deputy Commissioner and Executive Director at the New South Wales State Emergency Service. Passion for enhancing operational capability through emergency planning. He's driving innovation and delivering outcomes for communities throughout the state. So over to you both.
So in a room full of so many people with such experience when it comes to decision making, you've got to ask, why would we need a project such as this? When research before this project, what it's actually identified in our country's most capable decision makers, or there's a commonality in language, we don't use the same terms, we don't actually speak the same language. When it comes to how we judge decisions, decisions can be judged different ways, and it's a very personal thing, and it's judged differently between people, and it's influenced by a whole range of things. Differences between the context of the way that you're looking at the problem, differences in between rank, your experience, and it's as low as 50% whether or not the person sitting next to you that's had the same level of training, the same experience, sort of the same upbringing, will actually consider in a critical situation at times whether or not your decision is the right one. So in a world of dealing with worst case outcomes, Thomson's trolley problems where you can never actually see the alternative ending, and in what's current research is actually showing us when our decisions are questioned, it won't necessarily be based on the amount of life that's lost or the amount of money that's involved or the complexity of the incident. Quite often it can actually be because of, political pressure and public attention. It really comes to the question, how do we prepare our people to make effective decisions? You've used effective, not necessarily as opposed to good or bad, right or wrong, cost-benefit analysis. All this research has led into this project. So the project has had 3 phases again. So the first phase where we looked really broad and we went very, very deep across a whole range of industries internationally as well, looking at what we could actually steal from those areas and apply into the emergency management sector and also into the business sector. With that first phase, we actually published 4 articles going back at several months now. They're all available in the Australian Journal of Emergency Management, should you want to actually look into the research background. But again, we wanted to apply that into the field and actually look at how it would make the most impact across all services. So with that was the option of, or looking at options, how do we improve decision-making training and across a couple of key areas. With it, and this is where we're at now and what Dan will talk to in just a moment, is the development of testing of some of the training modules that we're talking about. With this, I will point out that, I'm very fortunate to somehow I've scraped into this research group, some of the very heavy hitters that we've got in part of the team, particularly Professor Rona Flynn and Jim McLennan, who we're really standing on their shoulders and working in this space. But with the research team as well, you've got some academics in there as well, so myself and Dr. Philip Butler and also Chris Bierman are frontline personnel that have the applied research space as well, so we're coming at it from a couple of different angles. In terms of the workshop and what we've actually applied and what was conducted with New South Wales SES, the premise behind the workshop was that in the middle what you can see is the decision-making theory and the concepts. So that's all the background information that we've gathered across the first phase. What we understand as well is, regardless of your technical ability, it comes second when it comes to being able to make effective decisions. So that's the non-technical skills, which are the foundations at the bottom of the slide. The three things which really impacted decision-making, as we found in terms of the broad literature review, were goal seduction, confirmation bias, and the psychological pressures of that environment. And the workshop that Dan's about to talk to now really started to tease that out and actually trial whether or not we could make some effective training around these spaces.
Thanks, Greg. For me, this was a little bit like something coming home to roost, because I'd been one of Chris Bierman's subjects in the middle of actually testing some of these things many, many years ago, actually working through his checklists of decision making and the like. So I was the guinea pig on the other end. Magically, I got to make a whole bunch of new guinea pigs out of some of my staff. What we did was actually pull together two different groups of incident controllers across the organisation. Some who were exceptionally experienced, had been through a lot of the things that Brendan's talked about over today, the last 4 or 5 years of significant and catastrophic incidents across the state of New South Wales particularly. And then a whole bunch of, I guess, fresh and green incident controllers that didn't have that experience. They may have played other roles in high pressure incident management teams, but never as the leader. We spend a lot of time working through scenario-based exercises to actually take people down the theory of decision making and how they made their decisions, not just what the decision was. And as Greg said before, you end up in the coroner's court, or you end up in those kind of environments. Often it is not about what the decision actually was that you made. It was actually, why did you make it? How did you get there? And how did you bring it all together? One of the really interesting parts was, I guess, the level of humility in the decision making around the very experienced people, and this concept of goal seduction and not getting sucked down particular routes with your decision making, but certainly was very different in its outcome with the fresher, greener people that we were putting through on the second day. It was very much this ability of, where would you get caught in that trap? How could you get caught in that trap? Surely you wouldn't. Whereas there was an acknowledgement by the most experienced and senior staff to actually go back and say, hey, I really need to make sure my blind spots are well and truly open and I can see where this is all coming from. Where did it go from there? So we ran two full-day workshops, some really positive feedback. I will be very open in the fact that one of our challenges across emergency services, most of our training really is vet-based training. To bring in academic learning and academic training can challenge people, and we certainly found that in places. But I'll also say the appetite for it was huge. And to go down that line from a professional development aspect, absolutely significant. As late as only about 2 weeks ago, how long have I been on leave for? About 2 weeks. When we're up in Taree, talking to our incident controllers and some of our senior staff who actually went through this, they straight up were coming to me and saying, I can see where what we went through back in December has actually changed the way I was making decisions. It was changing my thought processes, and it was changing the way I was analysing the information that I was given. And if that's not success, I don't know what is. We have taken it and we have rolled it into our training courses. We partner significantly with Fire and Rescue when it comes to doing our Level 3 incident controller training and the like, and we're working it into the processes in there. We've also launched a coaching and mentoring program within the agency, and a lot of this is underpinning that process as well. And the world doesn't tick without doctrine. Doctrine needs to be updated, and we are constantly working through that as we go. So where to from here? Greg, take us on.
So where to from here? The team is available to run more workshops across Australia, but really excitingly with this, the research has been that promising that it's been adopted in the UK, and we're actually now starting to do the research in that space, led by Rona and Phil Butler over there as well. really excitingly, it's led to the advanced draft of Australian National Operating Guidance, Decision Making in Disaster and Emergency Management, which is designed to be applied across service, regardless of industry, to provide understanding of how the decision process goes, how people form it, at what point a decision is made, and how to explain that decision in real time. It's also training modules are being developed covering the recording of decision making, how to do it, cognitive aids, the evaluation and use of them, guide to writing doctrine to support decision making, worst case scenario planning and operational discretion. And we are on time. Thank you.
Love the pride in the work and just how important that information is across so many areas. I just want to rewind it quickly. I made some, as I'm prone to do, made a silly comment in the last segue around the decisions our community make are easy. I sat down and went, no, they're not really. Sometimes they are, but they're not. I hope I didn't offend anyone. If I did, I apologise, because when you hear the complexity of the decisions that emergency managers make, you also have to think of some of the complexity of the decisions our communities are making as well. So I just wanted to stop and rewind for a second. But now move on to Ollie Costello. He's going to be talking to us about principles and protocols for cultural land management, governance and research. Ollie's the CEO of the Jagun Alliance and the Director of Natural Hazard Research Australia. He's a Bundjalung man from Northern Rivers of New South Wales with a personal professional expertise in culturally connected stewardship of country. Ollie has extensive experience working within Indigenous land and sea management, and particularly interested in empowering Aboriginal perspectives on fire, threatened and culturally significant species. Over to you, Ollie.
Booglebear. Rob, I'm just going to firstly apologise if I say anything silly. I'm prone to doing that at times, but I do want to just acknowledge country and pay respects to elders past, present and future. And thanks for the opportunity to come up here and share. I'm going to talk a bit about the project, principles and protocols work that I've been working with Tim and Biomi and a range of other researchers on. But it's more of a bit of a backdrop to think about how we reflect on utilisation and knowledge through practice. So I'm not going to have time to take you on the full journey, and there's time people are going to be keeping me on time probably. But stories are like shortcuts. And so hopefully I'll, maybe just tell a little story, a few little bits of story, and hopefully I don't lose you along the way. So how do we turn knowledge into practice? And what is our responsibility if we have knowledge? What is the point of knowledge if we don't know how to put it into practice? And so the research that we've done has come off the back of a whole heap of different bits of research and stuff. I don't really call myself a proper researcher. I'm just someone that likes to learn how to do things and do them. And I like to do that in a way with people through sharing. And so a lot of the research and the work that we've done it's not necessarily new stuff. Sometimes we learn new things, but a lot of times it's just learning how to share, translate, and it's actually applying that. And so as we're going through that journey with knowledge holders and practitioners, we're sharing things, we're learning from each other. We can't take credit for all that, but we can learn and share that knowledge. And so how in that experience is you have to be there to be a part of it. That's what we were saying, come and get on country, you've got to see it to believe, you've got to be a part of it. And obviously we can't take everybody there. So how do we learn from the work that we're doing and communicate that? Tim's going to do a yarn tomorrow, a bit more detail. So I'm not going to go into heaps of the detail of the project, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about, some of how the knowledge and experience creates understanding, and how we're some of the learnings, in a few words, is around how outcomes are driven by those relationships, relationships of trust and reciprocity. So as we're doing this work together, we're learning together. We have to be giving and sharing in that process. And so that reciprocity, that connection work is really critical. And so that can take time. Sometimes, we've got to go with the flow and like that, the long story, the proper way, and you walk that way and the shortcut. And sometimes we can get out of step. And so it's really important to sort of try and find those alignments and making sure that we're walking together. And a lot of people hit me yarn all the time. For me, it's about gathering and pathways and understanding how we come together and how we go same way or different ways, and the importance of coming back and sharing that process. And sometimes we want to get somewhere and we want people to be there, and we don't turn up and they turn up at a different time. And so things can take a while to find flow. But I've found that the more that we understand how important it is to build a relationship and tune in, the more that things can just flow and we can learn together through that process. So it's really, there's a few anecdotal sort of evolving impacts, I guess. Like I said, we're learning together, sharing together. And I think it's important, like I said, not to take credit for these things, but to understand that as we're coming in and dropping in to say, and I forgot to mention, this project was funded out of the post the Black Summer, even though fires didn't start in summer, it was a big season, that one, big summer. But came out of that research, the research came out of that process. And so we're coming into pretty, affected communities, and, for a lot of we're talking to cultural fire practitioners and knowledge holders, for all of us, it's really sad because we've been saying for a long time that this would happen, and a lot of these things we keep telling people are going to happen, and then people come and ask us, what do we know and how do we do this, and, and we feel sad and we feel upset about that. So going through that process of learning is really challenging. But being able to see some of the outcomes of that, seeing the work that we've done over time in this project and other projects to support Victorian traditional owners with their strategy and developing out their programs, seeing some of the great work coming out of WA, Dave's here, being able to work with those being involved in the research as they develop their program, being able to learn and share and see the work that we've been doing come through into their work and the review that they've been doing. A lot of stuff in New South Wales, looking at the work that the cultural science and the cultural fire management unit have been doing, the Bushfire Natural Hazards Research Centre in New South Wales, learning from that, like seeing how things, Philip is here, the work we did on cultural fire barriers in New South Wales. So there's all these things we're learning from each other. And so the anecdotal impacts. But how do we know whether people are really using our research, are really understanding the concepts and understanding that and putting it into practice? And we could have this yarn about fire thresholds, all sorts of research people. How do we know that people actually understand? The best way is being able to show people through practice. This is how you make fire with rub two sticks. This is how you light fire and make fire move for the country the right way. This is where the last spring, the Gung Budra, and this is the last place for water in this, in this landscape, and the stories that get told about places and connections. So that's a part of, I think, going forward, the work that we need to understand is how do we build more accountability in our practice. And like I sort of missed a few bits, but there was 2 recommendations that came out of the Black Summer research that led to this project, and they're really about listening, like voice, about like First Nations voices, and about developing some guidelines for practice. And so we've talked about it before, and there's plenty of information on our website around the guidelines that we've developed and and how to put them into practice. But we need to do more than that. We need to kind of tailor, sometimes there's work we need to do, that utilisation work, to understand how to communicate that into different spaces, but have that understanding of how we're learning from that impact. Because I know that there's some great stories we can tell about what people are drawing from our research and what we're learning, but I could tell you lots of stories about how people are not listening to us, not supporting us, making the same mistakes that they've been making for a long time, when we're just sitting here telling you, like, this is how you make fire, you want me to show you and we can go do that yarn or whatever. But here we are again having to say the same thing over and over again. It was really lovely hearing Tiani kind of, this morning, or this afternoon now, bring us into some of that space, and share some. She's just dropped into here and she's just sharing. She hasn't been in this yarn. I didn't gee her up. She's coming and dropping in, and so many of the things that she's saying I could really relate to, because I'm like, yeah, I know how that is. I know how that works. And how are we going for time? Suspected spam call coming in. Anyway, I'm on a rave. But when she was yarning, I just thought to myself, and I'm just trying this on now. I'm not going to do the whole I'm going to become a comedian thing. But research is kind of like digging for yams, right? Like, how do you know where to dig? You know, like some people know how to dig for yam, they know how to find the yam, you know. They'd be looking for the leaf, you know. How do you know, how do you identify which yams? You know, like that mushroom yarn, how do you know which mushroom are right there, you know? How do you know? Because they're plenty cheeky mushroom, plenty cheeky yam, you know? Plenty of things that look like they're okay to eat, look like they're okay to share, but when you do it, they're not, eh? And that's like, for us, that's a big part of that, like data sovereignty and ICIP and that laws, because we have a lot, like knowledge is to be shared, to practiced, but there's reasons why you can't just like watch someone digging for yams and then just go digging for yams too, you know, because they look the same, but they don't taste the same, anyway. It's also about giving back, you know, like, so when you go digging for yam, you don't take all the yam, eh? You've got to leave yam for future. And so when you're going and doing research and sharing and, you know, money, all those things, you've got to like make sure that, you know, you understand how much you can take and you can't take and how you're going to give back. And so, you know, can't just keep digging. You've got to kind of understand when to stop. Anyway, I'm losing my points. But also, how do we carry yam? You know, like how do we make, you know, dilly bag, or, you know, how do we understand how to, you know, because I've been digging yam all day, so I'm a good yam digger. I'm not a. But yeah, then I've got to bring that back to a family and old people that I need to not just share back to Jagun, the country, giving yam. I've got to give yam to old people and family too. So I've got to know how to, you know, not just dig yam, I've got to know how to make basket too, or maybe get, I don't know. And anyway, and then how to prepare the yam, eh? Like how to make the yam safe, or the bugum jali, like the black bean, or what is it? How do you know how to make him safe to eat? And that's where this trying to get to, utilisation and, you know, like how do we make it safe to eat? How do we make it, you know, for different people, different ways of understanding? I'm just saying things, I don't know if people even understand what I'm saying, eh? But, you know, like that's part of the work. Anyway, how am I going for time? Probably almost out. All right, I'm getting there. Anyway, so it's not just about digging for yam. That's the end of the story. No. So yeah, going sort of future utilisation, translation for this work, and you know, it's always like projects, or you know, you just keep, you know, you got to draw a line, but then you got to, you know, move on and do something as well. It's kind of the same, but a little bit different. And so for us going forward, really some of the key things we're really looking at trying to go forward with is that like sort of cultural sort of learning, like the sort of on, you know, like how do we support knowledge holders that know how to dig yam the right way, but they don't get up and do a, you know, science thing or PhD. How do we support them to teach that knowledge? And how do we learn from the knowledge? Like I'm here, you know, like because a lot of people have invested in me, you know, and I have a responsibility to go forward and give back. And that's not necessarily pushing people down pathways that you've been on. It's making space for them to find their own way. And a lot of our old people have really good ways of doing things, finding yam and water and making fire and that. And so, yeah, so that's one thing. And the other one is really about that accountability piece. How do we make sure in a good way that we're helping to improve practice and hold people accountable? I'm seeing a lot of opportunities lost because people aren't listening or finding ways to communicate. I'm increasingly seeing people telling a new story for them that's an old story for us that we've been saying for a long time, and not acknowledging us and not understanding that we're a part of that learning process, and we can help you. So lots more as well. A lot of people probably got ideas, and I'm getting the zero. I'm going to take that as O for Ollie. But I'm just going to finish up. Yenalina Garama, Lila Jagun, Jagun Garama Mibarad. So we care for country as country cares for us, you know. And so as we share and as we learn, we get back, yeah. And that's the old way of understanding that the more that you take, the more you got to give back. You know, so you do that through sharing and practicing, you know, and then as you get older, then more people understand your way.
I now know why the NHRA board meetings go so long. But I also know why there's such quality programs of research and the utilisation is well thought and so deeply considered. Thanks very much, Ollie. Appreciate that. So this is the last presentation for this afternoon before we move into the short awards ceremony. Very short awards ceremony. Sorry, Ian. So Patrick Schell is manager of the planning unit within the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service Fire and Incident Operations Branch. branch. Patrick oversaw Philippe Ayres in his mentorship of Shabnam Varsegi as the centre's first internship pilot. Over to you, Patrick, for 10 minutes.
Thanks, Rob. I just wanted to basically share the experience that we had. It was a great opportunity to be part of the first intern program that was run through the NHRA. And I understand that there's going to be a few more opportunities for others to get involved. So hopefully a few insights along the way. I think between me and Andrew, we've got plenty of mileage out of this photo. Might look familiar. But I thought it might be worth just putting some names to those faces because it kind of highlights the amount of collaboration and everyone involved in the program. So if I start from the right there, we've got Shiva Prasad from NHRA. Next to Shiva, we've got Dr. Kat Haynes, who's from our Science and Insights Division, who co-supervised Shabnam. Next to Kat, we have Dr. Philippe Ayres, who also played a supervisory role, and that was probably a more hands-on direct supervisor. In the blue, we have our student, which is Shabnam, and then some random parky on the end. So I'd just like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians on of the land that we're gathered today, and also those online, and thank Cliffy Wilson for the smoking ceremony this morning and the welcome to country. So just to give you a bit of a sense of the environment that Shabnam had to work within and the complexity she had to deal with in undertaking the project. National Parks has a lot of diversity as both a firefighting authority under the New South Wales legislation. We've got formal responsibilities for response. And then we manage around 8 million hectares of land, public land that's reserved for conservation. So that also brings a whole heap of responsibilities as well, not only from the fire perspective. And our structure, we deliver those functions through our operations branches. We've got 8 of those across the state, which are highlighted in the different colours, and then 34 areas that really operate autonomously. So they do the work and deliver our priorities, which are administered through the 7 program branches. So lots of different functions, lots of different priorities, lots of complexities to navigate. Relatively large organisation, and from my perspective, I think we've got a pretty good appetite for research, innovation, and improving what we do and how we do it, and looking for efficiencies wherever we can. We've had some really good experience in the past. We did participate in the student program that was done through the New South Wales Bushfire Risk Management Research Hub. Our senior project officer within the Fire and Incident Operations branch, some of you might know Carrie Wilkinson. She came through that program and now is one of the key people within the Fire and Incident Operations branch. So with such a positive experience with lots of benefits, we had no hesitation in expression and interest to NHRA, and we're really grateful for the opportunity to once again be involved. A lot of administration for those who are about to engage in this, just to set the program up, just to get the recruitment processes done, make sure our agreement's in place, ensure we've got really clear roles and responsibilities up front of what each of the partners do. You can see all the banners of the different organisations involved, but let me tell you, it's really worthwhile spending that time to get things right and make sure the student is really well set up so that we've got a really good solid foundation for the smooth running, and the student can basically do what needs to be done without worrying about any sort of administrative issues. So yeah, obviously some really good opportunities to streamline those, but they are important. And before I launch into the project, I guess it was really important for everyone involved that we gave the student and gave Shabnam a real life experience of what it was like to work within a fire and land management agency. So I was getting a little bit concerned because it did take a bit of time to actually set up the program and get the agreements executed, get the onboarding processes going. So I'm glad Shabnam hung in there and was patient with the process, and then we followed up with issuing a U-Butte laptop and all these great logins for different programs, and none of them worked. So, and it took a couple of weeks to actually sort them out. So in reality, we were giving Shabnam a real life experience of what it's like to be a public servant. So, the next really key point is around supervisors and selecting supervisors for those getting involved. We were really blessed to have Dr. Felipe Ayres and Dr. Kat Haynes within our ranks. They are well connected, well versed, and really knowledgeable when it comes to that research space, as well as that adoption and research utilisation. So fantastic to have them on board. And we actually embedded Shabnam within our operational improvement team, which is all about trying to enhance our practices and making ourselves more effective and efficient in what we do, particularly on the fire ground. She attended regular team meetings, attended the unit meetings, branch meetings, gave update on her research, engaged with staff in that sense. We also organised in-person sessions so that we could maintain that connection. Majority of the work was done remote, but really important that we gave that supervisor student a bit of a personal touch as well. And then with some guidance from Felipe and Kat, Shabnam was really given the reins to run the project and really, navigate the complexity of what is national parks and set up that engagement with all the internal and external stakeholders. The project itself was to basically, run with the theme of this afternoon, was to really explore the factors that affect the integration of bushfire research into the operational practices of national parks, highlighting some of the specific barriers and enablers. And this was done through a qualitative approach where we used a series of semi-structured interviews and focus groups, all led by Shabnam. So really, we wanted to bridge that gap between research and practice and better understand within our organisation what was influencing those. So basically, with that wealth of knowledge and understanding that was built through that qualitative process, we were able to categorise all those insights into 4 key themes. And within those key themes, we'll be able to identify the barriers and enablers that affect research utilisation within our organisation. I won't go through those in detail, but I guess with a really crystallised and clear understanding of what those barriers and enablers are, we'll start to identify some opportunities on how we might be able to overcome some of those barriers and really strengthen some of those enablers to help with better research uptake across our organisation. And here's the real key outcomes. To give it a bit of a summary, knowledge brokering and that knowledge translation within our organisation was a really key point. And in improving our capabilities within our workforce to translate research into practical outcomes was something that was highlighted through this work. So, and that's both through actually giving people a role and a formal role in that space, and also doing some training on how that might work. Improvements in our communication, our collaboration, and our research engagement processes were highlighted as well. The pursuit of ongoing financial stability when it comes to research, it seems to be a common theme right across the research sector, but trying to get long-term investment in what we're doing to establish partnerships with our academic bodies so that we can do that more long-term research that leads to improvements across the organisation. And I guess the other really key factor that I think was highlighted was that leadership support and engagement with leadership, and giving leaders, hopefully leaders give their staff permission to engage and be innovative in this space. Lots of benefits. I'm going to be really quick here. I've just got the wrap up. So basically, Shabnam provided a resource to systematically work our way through a problem that we'd known about for a long time, and put that in writing, document that, put a fresh set of unbiased eyes across it, and give us something practical that we could engage with the executive. And now we're in the processes of building an action plan to address those opportunities there. Whilst it's specific to National Park, while I like to think we're a pretty special bunch of people, I know our issues aren't unique, and they're shared across other organisations, so it can be adapted without a doubt, particularly to fire and land management agencies. And for Shabnam's perspective, she prepared a really quality paper. She's submitting that to journals. Hopefully we get a publication out of it. And I'm really pleased that one of my last conversations with Shabnam was that she's now looking to pursue a career in knowledge brokering to help organisations, overcome some of the challenges they have in that research uptake. So we've broadened her horizon and opened up another career path for Shabnam, which is perhaps probably the most pleasing of it at all. So big thanks to Shabnam for hanging in there through all the hiccups at the start, which us public servants are really used to. Felipe and Kat for their excellent supervision of Shabnam, the operational improvement team, who's led by Andy McQuee, providing that really safe environment for our student to operate. APR intern, RMIT, who's the university where Shabnam came from, and NHRA for the opportunity. So thanks.
Thanks very much, Patrick. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for, I'm sure you just need to take a breath now, because people have been giving you the insights to a whole range of different projects. And can I just ask you to thank one more time all of those people who spoke to you this afternoon. And of course the great team at Natural Hazards Research Australia who pulled that together, the amount of work that goes on in the background to do these things really important. I talked about curiosity and humility at the start, and throughout the last day or so I've been using the word angry. I come away from these things a little bit angry sometimes at why it's so simple. Why can't people see the world like I do? And I just ask you to put all of those emotions together, and I suppose it probably comes out at passionate. And just as you go through your conversations in the next day or two, just look at how you're building on someone else's argument and new connections that you can make, because we've already seen the value of researchers and end users working together. So please, I just put that challenge out to you as get angry in a respectful and inclusive way. I'm just going to stop talking now and hand over to Ian McKenzie, and he'll be taking you through an awards ceremony.
Thanks very much, Rob. And I just encourage people this will only take 10 or 15 minutes, but please stay, because this is a most important part. As chair of the board for NHRA and as a director, and I think I can speak on behalf of my fellow directors, there's a couple of things that as chair and a director really hearten us. One is to see the research being used and hear of the impact. And that last session was just fantastic. It is nothing better than sitting back and going, you know what, it's all worth it when we see what can be achieved. And the second thing, of course, is to celebrate and reward exceptional research and teamwork. And that's what we're here for as the closing for today, is to present 2 awards, and awards that celebrate exceptional research and teamwork that has been used to improve decision-making to save lives and protect communities. There's 2 categories of awards in this. Our Natural Hazards Research Team Award, and our Natural Hazards Research Australian Postgraduate Student Award. And the Student Award will be presented first. I have to thank our panel of judges. It's not an easy task. This year, our judges are Dr. John Handmer. Is John here? He's still in Europe. Lucky John. Professor Cheryl Desher, our Science and Innovation Director, and Dr. Supriya Gurung, our Senior Project and Education and Training Officer at NHRA. The criteria the panel apply for the awards is all about outstanding quality, usefulness and knowledge translation. And it was not an easy task this year. In deciding the Natural Hazards Research Australian Postgraduate Student Award, in fact, before they could come to deciding a winner, they found two were equally suitable for being highly commended. So we'll just call out these and thank them and congratulate them. The first is Dr. Fadia Isaac. Her project Fadia is highly commended for her project on digital interventions to address sleep disturbances and trauma symptoms in wildfire survivors. Dr. Isaac is commended for the rapid publication of her findings and extensive engagement with media. And we're looking forward to hearing more about Sleep Best Eye, in how it's being used and the end user experiences. The second highly commended project is Dr. Suki Jaswal. And Suki's project is highly commended for her research project on the short and long-term impacts of smoke exposure on the ice surface. She is commended for her rigorous approach involving more than 400 members of emergency services and for engaging with such diversity of end users. And we're looking forward to more about that and the end users. And can I say, we heard that showcased at our Brisbane stakeholder forum last year, I think that was. And it was received with fantastic vigour. So they are highly commended. And now to the winner. Well, the panel had an equally challenging time and could not decide a winner. So there are two of equal merit to receive the 2025 Student Research Award. And Andrew's on stage and will present the winners with the award. The first is Dr. Kayam Padamsi. Please come and join us on stage. And we congratulate you on this grounded and rigorous approach to inquiring into a topic that's had significant personal motivation. Kayam's research has been cited more than 740 times by academics. By academics from around the world and has informed subsequent research, including underpinning a $40,000 contract research project with the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions in WA on contamination risks for firefighters. Ahead of the 24-25 fire season, Kayam's research was used in an unprecedented decision to procure and deploy P3 respiratory protection for firefighters. And in WA, the use of washing machines and on-site showering are being used to help protect families of firefighters from exposures. And congratulations. Thank you. Our second winner, unfortunately, can't be with us this evening, but is Dr. Numan Khattak. And Dr. Numan Khattak is congratulated for his research project on characterisation and seismic vulnerability assessment of legacy unreinforced masonry buildings in Queensland. The research produced two major outcomes: a specialised seismic vulnerability assessment framework for these buildings and improved emergency preparedness insights for at-risk building stock. Numan has clear steps for enabling consistent seismic vulnerability assessment across Australia and supporting national emergency response coordination. Please join in thanking and congratulating Numan. Our next award is a Research Team Highly Commended Award. Of all the excellent submission, one project stood out, judges as highly commended, and then, of course, we'll have a winner as well. The Highly Commended Award goes for Community Experiences of the 2022 Australian Flooding in New South Wales and Queensland project. The project applied a gentle methodology to engage with community members, building off previous successful uses in I hope that wasn't my drink being drunk. Engagement with diverse stakeholders about the findings, resulting in extensive take-up by state and Commonwealth government agencies. The research contributed to the independent review of the Commonwealth Disaster Funding and Insurance Council of Australia. And I have to say, at our stakeholder events, I often talk about the test of our research is not how many projects we find on library shelves, but how many we find on bureaucrats' desks. That is a piece of research that I know sat for a long time, if not still, on Brendan Moon's desk and others around the country, and used as a key source of reference. But our panel has also decided on 2 submissions being considered of equal merit to receive the 2025 Research Team Award. I'll now invite the first up on stage and then the second. So the first award winner, and this goes to Predictions in Public, Understanding the Design, Communication and Dissemination of Predictive Maps to the Public. And I'd like to invite the research team led by Dr. Chloe Begg and Associate Professor Paula Dutzen to accept the award. The whole... I'd use the steps too. Congratulations. This project is already delivering practical guidance that emergency management agencies can readily implement, and we've seen that during bushfire emergencies. It sets a new standard for university government collaboration in disaster research and highlights the opportunities for strong project delivery and outcomes using a co-design ethos between research and end users. The project's design principles are embedding essential guidance and consistency for map design into the mainframe ADRI's National Doctrine on Public Information and Warnings. Now, to join them on stage of equal merit in this award, Bushfire Risk at the Rural-Urban Interface, I'd like to invite the researcher team led by Professor David Bowman to accept the award. The project is tackling complex challenges of immediate interest and use in the aftermath of the California fires earlier this year. It highlights the challenges facing Hobart and the opportunity for communities to directly engage with disaster risk reduction in their own backyard. The team has tackled multiple challenges head-on, from garden fire hazard assessment using an app to house loss analysis, ember attack, simulation and fire spread modelling. The project was also recognised in a collective research centre application to the 2024 ADRI National Resilient Australia Awards, winning the National Research for Impact Award. Please join with me in acknowledging and congratulating all of the winners on stage. Thank you. Yes, well, we'll do photographs. Yes. So is Mel here? Oh, they're here. Right, Mel's team, come join us on stage. And what we will do, let's invite the others back and we'll do the group photo all in one too. So all the other highly commended and winners, everyone stay here. The others can come up and join us on stage too, please. Excellent. And as we talk about the future and the future of research and knowing the future, one thing I do know is that our research future is in very capable hands and being led by other more experienced, capable hands. Oh, David, I'm looking at you. That's all right. So many thanks. Congratulate our winners once again, please. As you can leave us to take photographs. I will conclude the day and invite you to join us for some refreshments. Looks of size of, thank goodness, it's time for a drink. Please enjoy. Thank you very much for staying with us.